Okay. Welcome, everybody, to Great Life, Greater Impact. I'm really excited for this new year. I hope you're excited for this new year. The topic for today is a perfect brightness of hope for your future. Do you guys have that? Does everybody have a perfect brightness of hope for your future? A lot of people that I talk to when I do private one-on-one mentoring with others tell me how afraid they are. They're fearful about what's coming. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of chaos in the world right now. And that can be unsettling and upsetting to some. There's quite a bit, if you have studied a lot of the prophecies from sacred texts and ancient writings and our scriptural texts, it doesn't look good for the future. It doesn't look too bright and shiny. But I want to help us all grab hold on and paint a better picture because I do think there is a tremendous amount of hope and things to look forward to. I love following people who know a lot about astrology. I don't know a lot about astrology. I know just very little, but I love following these people. Somebody sent me a video just a little while ago, a couple days ago, and it was Pam Gregory. You can go follow her on YouTube. She's amazing. But she is a famous world astrologist, and she talks about different timelines and events that she sees that are written in the stars for the collective, for the globe. And they've been talking quite a bit about what's coming for 2024. And it has to do, the theme for this year has to do with change. Lots of change is coming for this year, and lots of shifting from old paradigms to new paradigms, lots of letting go of old ideologies and ideas and things that we once used to cling to find our safety and security and support in. We're going to have to let some of that go. And for some people, if that's where they choose to invest all of their attention and their clinginess to, it's going to be very bumpy. So, but I want to paint a different picture. I had a beautiful conversation with Jason Wharton not very long ago. We haven't known each other for very long. We just barely met through Facebook, through the wonderful technology of Facebook, and we've had some great conversations together. And something that I really love about Jason is that he is a man of deep desire to know the Lord and to seek for truth. And in that process of seeking truth, God has spoken to him, and he's received a lot of downloads, revelations, whatever you want to call it, inspiration. And he's written many of those things down. When we get done with the class, Jason, I'll probably have you share your links so that people can find out more about some of your writings, the things that you are putting out there to provide hope for the world. And so uh, Jason's been receiving prophetic messages for more than 20 years. And it's something that really attracted me because I'm kind of in that same boat. I've been really striving to listen to heaven for a very long time. Most of you guys who join these classes every single week are kind of in the same boat. You've either been on this journey for a long time, or you're just now getting your feet wet in learning to hear the divine speak to you and through you. And some of you might call that channeling. Some of you might call that receiving revelation. It doesn't really matter what the lingo is. And again, my disclaimer for all of these classes is please don't follow me. Please don't believe a word that I say. Please don't even believe a word that Jason says today, unless you take that. The onus is on you to take that to heaven, ask your questions, receive your truth in the way that you do. It's not our job necessarily to teach absolute truth to you. It's your job to maybe hear what we say, but take what you learn and get that second witness from the divine for yourself. So we're not here to create a following. We're not here to tell people that we know more than anybody else. We're all in the same boat. in humanity. So the onus is on you. If you're triggered by some of the things that we say, or the lingo that we use, or the wording or the verbiage that we use, maybe is out of alignment with the words that you might use, or the words that you grew up using and feel familiar with. If you're triggered by that, awesome. That's great. You should take those triggers and go figure that out for yourself and find out why it bothers you, why it triggers you. Get your own truth, and then be brave enough to stand up and walk in that truth that you get in that personal walk or that personal relationship with God. So with that being said, I want to introduce Jason. He has a concept that he has written about and that has taught classes, many classes on, called the Creation Blueprint. And I wanted to have him come on here today to share that with you, because it really opened my eyes to a whole new way of thinking about cycles and patterns and history and metaphor, and how we can use cycles, patterns, history, metaphor as we create our own trajectory and as we choose into the trajectories that we're going to choose into. I highly recommend, if you have not done so yet, go back to my YouTube channel, which is Great Life, Greater Impact on YouTube, and go watch The New Earth is Being Birthed and How to Prepare for 2024. There were some really great suggestions and tools that came out of that class. And if you are concerned and fearful and afraid of what's coming, go watch that class. I think that it will really help give you a tremendous amount of hope. Also, one last announcement. Over on my website, greatlifegreaterimpact.com, I actually do an extended class. It's not even a class, it's a healing session where those who are members of the members area on that website can jump on and participate in a live Zoom setting where we get at doing our inner work and do the healing so that we can let go of some of this stuff, and so that we can move in a forward direction with more clarity and confidence and inner peace and momentum on our journeys. If that sounds like something that interests you, then feel free to visit that website. The links will all be in the description of this video once it posts to YouTube. With that being said, I'm going to bring Jason on. Just add pin. There we go. And Jason, you are co-host, so you'll be able to share your slides and your screen. If you guys have comments or questions, feel free to drop those into the chat box, or feel free to interject if you feel so inclined. I'm going to turn the time to you, Jason, to introduce the topic and then go for it.
Okay, thank you, Janet. Like Janet said, I've been in the throes of, what do I do with my life? What do I do with all this craziness that's going on in the world around us? And I have an LDS background, and so I come from that view of the world, and I was just feeling like, oh, I wasn't getting all the answers, even though I believe the faith I was raised in, should have all the answers. And so I've been on this quest to understand what is going on in the world, and through this process, I was given some answers that were satisfying to me. And one of the things that I did to get to this point was put everything on the shelf that I'd been taught, and just try to carefully rebuild my own view, but assisted with the Holy Spirit. Because I realized there's so much stuff I believe that I just picked up here and there without even really thinking about it. You just absorb this general view, and I'm just like, well, one day I was reading the scriptures, and I got this impression that it's like, Jason, you're clueless. You really don't get it. And it was really humiliating, because I thought I was a pretty sharp guy, but the Spirit told me, no, you're totally missing it. And so I kind of did this reset, and so it's like, okay, ultimately I had to just start from the beginning. Who am I? What is my divine origin? All of this type of thing. what's my place in the world? And through this whole process, I ultimately was given a completely new, to me, view of creation. And what I could do is share my screen here, and hopefully this works. And what I learned was in the Bible, we've got these 7 days of creation. And I don't know if you can see this arrow right here.
Yeah, we can see your screen. That looks really great.
Okay, great. So this is the we are here, because what I found out is that the 7 days of creation are actually what turns out to be a prophetic blueprint of the 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 world that we're in. You know, we're in the end times or the last days, and basically we are right here, right at the last two of the 7 days is day 6 and day 7, and we're right now going out of day 6 into day 7 is what I discovered. So you know, if you ever go into like a great big mall and you're looking for a particular store, and you look around and there's the map of the whole mall, and the first thing you need to find is where am I
Yeah, that's
on
true.
this map? And then okay, because it doesn't matter if you find on the map where you need to go, which I think all of us know where we need to go, but we the first thing is you need to know where are we.
Yeah, that orientation is so vital.
Yeah. And so I found the map, and then it was an easy thing to figure out, okay, where am I on the map? And so we're actually just on the cusp of entering into day 7, the 7th millennium of the old world. And so as it turns out, each day of the creation pertains to a millennium of our time. And there's a scripture that let's see if I can, Zoom's conflicting with my menu, but I think everyone's probably familiar with the biblical concept, a day to the Lord is 1,000 years unto men. That's in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. And so when you apply that to the 7 days of creation, and that God has this script, you know, we call the scriptures what we do, but do we really think about the fact that God's written the script? He knows how things are going to play out, because I don't know how many people get into, you know, deep metaphysics and stuff, but there's a science behind how and why cycles repeat in human civilization. And that's essentially what happens is the work of creation, at least on our level, is how does human civilization cycle? And that's essentially what the scriptures give us, is the blueprint for each cycle of creation. And so when you take day 1 as the beginning, I think everybody knows that Adam and Eve are in the beginning. But the interesting thing that you shift into is when you understand that things are in cycles, Adam also comes in the end as well as the beginning. And so that's one of the interesting things is when you look at these days of creation as millennia, we find Adam, or man, who is Adam and Eve, in day 6, which is right where we are now. And so what this pattern revealed to me is that the end and the beginning are intertwined. When we have the birth of a new world, like what you mentioned, that it actually is happening during the end times of the old world, because there's this day 7, day 1 overlap. And so we are literally in the biblical blueprint on the cusp of day one of a new world.
Jason, I
And
love that concept because it shows, I mean, that is exactly how I think I've seen it as I've asked these questions too, is that old things are passing away and new things are being birthed simultaneously on this planet, even as we speak. So I love that concept of day seven being also day one at the same time.
yeah, and another thing is though is Mesopotamia was the place of genesis of the old world. And so even though it's simultaneous in time, the new world's Garden of Eden is here in America, which is the new world. And so when we call America the new world, we can now tap into how that's biblically relevant, as well as just, hey, there's this continent over there we didn't know about, and it's new and it's a new world. It's not a cartographic new world. It's or not only cartographic, it's also biblically the new world.
Mhm.
And and so maybe we could take a minute to just lock in on this a little bit. Like if we take the fourth millennium, which would be about 1000 BC to 180, and we know right at the tail end of that time, Jesus Christ was born. Like I think the scholars kind of landed about 2 BC, thereabout. And so right at the tail end of the fourth millennium, which corresponds to the fourth day, we have the coming of Jesus Christ, who referred to himself as the light and life of the world. And so when we look at this blueprint and we look at the greater light to rule the day on day four, that's actually talking about when the spiritual source of the light and life of humanity came into and incarnated within this world.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
profound. I have never made the correlation of the creation story like this before, but that's profound.
Yeah, when I saw this, I'm like, no way. I can't be the first one, at least that's gone on record publicly as having made this realization, but I have not found anyone else that's ever done this other than, I mean, obviously, Jesus knew because he knew the blueprint because he knew what role he was fulfilling. And and then this is why, Jesus would tell his disciples, for example, go and be fishers of men, because look at what's next. Day five, the creatures in the waters wherein dwells life. And so here we have the beginning of a major world religion, Christianity. And I mean, they even put like fish symbols on their bumper stickers on their cars because it's
Yeah.
like they know who they are. A lot of people try to say, oh, this is the Piscean age and this, and they try to interweave the zodiac into this creation blueprint, but they don't really go together. And so um, what we're really talking about is biblical creation. Obviously we know patterns can apply on many levels. And so I don't want to try to say that there aren't other levels and other places where this applies, but this is one that's been overlooked that I want to draw attention to. And that is, if you take the concept of a microcosm, that within the domain of humanity, we have the sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the plants, the oceans, the land, the creatures, and man. It's like, so within humanity, there's the spiritual equivalent of these different levels or measures of glory, of spiritual glory. And so when you look at Christianity, it's kind of like the early rudimentary beginning stages where the Gentiles, who are kind of those wild branches, so to speak, that need some preparation before they're really ready to be brought into the fullness of the Father's kingdom. And so Christianity's offered to the Gentiles to put them on that spiritual path of growth and evolution. And so they begin submersed in the waters of tyranny, because the Roman Empire was tyrannical, the way it dealt with people. And the Christians were treated quite poorly. And so here we have these creatures wherein dwells the breath of life. They get that Holy Spirit indwelling, but they don't have surroundings that support them. They're under a cruel, heartless, tyrannical government. So that's why they're submersed in the waters. They're very limited in what they can do. And that's just the reality of where Christianity had to begin. And and then you've got on day 5 the birds. And this is something a lot of people don't know a lot about is the Quran actually talks a lot about how they are like the birds. It will say Allah knows all the prayers of the birds, and how important is prayer to the Muslim faith. They've got a lot of their set prayers throughout the day. And there's passages in the Quran that says the birds are genera like yourselves. And instead of talking about fishing and going and catching fish and being fishers of men, it talks about falconry, and that you send off your falcons to hunt and keep whatever they catch. And Muhammad was called the falcon of the Lord. And so we see that these days of creation give us this high level blueprint of what's going on in world civilization, because Islam is obviously a very major world religion, and certainly it would have its place in the overall world blueprint. And one of the beautiful messages we get from this way of looking at creation is Christians and Muslims, they both occupy a place in the spiritual cosmos that God organized, and he called those things good. They have their place, they have their measure of creation, and they provide for his spirit children that place that they need for their growth and their development, whatever's most appropriate for their experience in life. And they're all ultimately working together it's like in our physical cosmos, we've got all these different things. Like, we find out how tragic it would be if we just lost the bees. I mean, if you take one thing out of our ecology and the interdependence that we actually really have and the role that they fulfill, if we look at that in spiritual terms, now we can look at the great variety of spiritual life that we encounter on this planet, and we can now see it more with this sense of beauty and amazement and appreciation for all the different things that each type of spiritual life contributes. And that'll do a lot to dispel the interdenominational and interreligious contention
Yeah.
and
I think that religion has definitely played a vital role on the planet for sure. But I think what we're seeing now is that there's been a lot of convolution and corruption in these things, and I'm sure you're going to talk about that as we come up into day 6 and 7 and 1. But um, I think that people are becoming more and more disenfranchised by what religion can offer them in their ascension phase.
mhm. Yeah, because I think ultimately when we talk in terms of ascension, people want to be able to kind of break out of, because this is like this is the matrix, if you want to think of it in that sense. This is what humanity's delivering to itself.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to grow and mature and transcend out of the suffering of this world. And and so this does kind of give well, it at least gives a basis so that the corruption that has gotten into all of these different religions, because now we know that divine has given us all of these different measures of spiritual glory, and that really they're all that they can all be harmonized. And
Yeah.
I think this shifts the context from, instead of battling about which is the path of ascension, it's more like God's given me my place and my measure for this cycle.
Yeah.
How can I make sure that I'm magnifying the glory that he's intended for me in this part that's
Oh,
my part?
that is so profound. That is so profound. And let me just interject and then I'll let you kind of finish
Mhm.
that thought. But all of last year we talked about spiritual sovereignty, which is self-governance. You cannot govern yourself unless you know yourself, unless you know your origins, unless you know where you've come from and where you're going and where you actually are. And so man, I love this topic so much. I love that you have been able to kind of organize these thoughts and use the symbology of it all for us to be able to see ourselves and where we're at, where we're going, where we've been, and how to govern ourselves as we navigate through this. I just love this. I love this concept. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is anybody who gets this introduction, basically I've now just handed them a brand new set of scriptures because they'll never read the same again. Because now as you're reading scriptures and God's talking about the creation, we can now shift our thinking to interpret what we're reading in terms of the spiritual cosmos instead of what we normally orient to in our conscious thinking as our physical cosmos. And so when God talks about there shall be no more sea, like a prophecy saying that the waters are going to go away, it's like, well, we don't have to stress and worry about that the the planet Earth is going to get changed and look like Mars, you know.
Yeah.
But what he means is the tyranny, the oppression of being submersed in the waters, like the Christians being underneath Roman tyranny. It's what God's saying is when Zion flourishes and spreads abroad, that there won't be any more tyranny that you're submersed in. And so you can extract different layers or levels of meaning out of passages when you attune your interpretation to hone in on this spiritual cosmos.
I
Uh,
also love what you said about the different religions of the earth, and there are many religions of the earth, and that it's okay. They all have different parts and pieces, and they all play a different role. And to me, that's oneness. We don't all have to be at the same level of understanding. We don't all have to think the same. We don't all have to have the same experiences in order to experience unity and oneness. And I think that's kind of what I got as you were talking about day 5 with the different, the early Christians and the different types of religions as we evolve into this, these other millennia. I think that that's ultimately where we're headed is unity and community and collaboration and oneness.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, like, let's go ahead and move to day 6, where we've got the creatures on dry land. And dry land means that the tyranny of man has been eliminated, and there's a more of a sense of political governance that acknowledges individual liberty, individual sovereignty. And because ultimately, when the human condition is at its fullest measure of glory, we are sovereign beings. We ultimately are standing as completely accountable for everything we think, say, and do. That we own who we are. We know who we are fully and completely. And and going from the measures of spiritual life of Christianity, Islam, and I look at the animals here as Protestantism because they really were who we can give thanks to getting the Bible to the common person. Everybody's reading the Bible for themselves and saying, hey, we shouldn't be getting treated this way.
Yeah.
We're children of God. We have and demanding more and more respect till ultimately we have the culmination of the dry land in what the colonizers of the New World. I mean, that's the spirit that had them coming to America was we want to throw off whatever's left of the tyranny of the old world. And we want this new experience where there's this egalitarian society where people look at each other as equals. It's not this feudalistic tiered, royalty privileges and all this kind of stuff, but that everybody who's part of this, we'll call it the American experiment, a lot of people refer to it as, but really it's humankind reaching back to experience mankind. And I wanted to bring that out as day 6 is when God forms man in his own image and likeness. And this is the sovereign, responsible, creative state, the highest state of human consciousness is to be at that stature of man. And that I distinguish mankind from humankind in that sense that you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do go into that more. Let's distinguish the difference between humankind and mankind. I would love for you to talk about that.
Okay, great. And this is kind of what drew me to your material because your sovereignty series, because ultimately that is the difference.
Mhm.
When somebody's reached that state of individual sovereignty and then also extending and honoring others and treating them as sovereigns, that's a major shift because now you're not trying to control or manipulate anyone. You're living your existence honoring and respecting your fellow men. And and you're also wanting structures of governance that uphold that and hold that as the standard for the experience of the citizens, your fellow citizens. And and so that's mankind. Humankind is when you kind of have this dark, pessimistic view of the human condition. Well, if you don't put them under all these controlling mechanisms of governance, it's just going to be misery. So we need to impose all of these infringements on sovereignty, certain forms of taxation and massive red tape and bureaucracy to try to, start and operate a business or whatever. There's just all these mechanisms of force and control and hoops you've got to jump through. And
Yeah, it's led to gross oppression. And I think people feel that. I think that we all are starting to realize, hey, we live in a prison on this planet right now. The oppression and the tyranny that is in every system that we know about now is pretty gross. And I think that it's fully ripe to go into this next phase that I know you're going to share with us that
yeah.
as far as day 7, day 1, but
Uh-huh.
um, it has definitely served its purpose. Now it's time for something new.
Yeah, exactly. And by being in this kind of tyrannical matrix that we're breaking out of, that's the role of Adam and Eve is to stand above the tyranny of the past. And so that here's this battle between freedom and tyranny, basically. And that's ultimately, like you alluded to, what happens on day 7 and day 1 is because some people want to answer the human condition, the problems and the sufferings of the human condition with more and more and more appealing to some centralized totalitarian governing system that some people call it the prison planet system. And and they look at that as a way to try to solve the ailments of society. And so people are basically getting divided. Other people are saying, no, if we just honor each other and have love and out of a voluntary basis that comes from the heart, just look out for each other, you know, do unto others as you would have done unto you, just this golden rule foundation. And that the only laws that we have are to answer trespasses and injustices against the sovereignty of another. You know, when you have that really minimalistic uh, type of society, that's essentially what God's kingdom is the absolute minimal laws, and that the only laws you really have just simply reflect when somebody's crossed a boundary that ultimately means the sovereignty of another has been violated, and
Mhm.
that no other laws are necessary, and just get rid of it all. And that's kind of where I see things going is that when God forms man in his own image and his own likeness, it's this system of government, because you know, God's kingdom is government. And government means force. I mean, it's a force to reckon with. But God's government has that golden rule foundation. That's why Jesus says all the law and the prophets essentially boil down to do unto others as you would have done unto you.
Yeah,
That
you know what I think? I think that it becomes more self-governance. I don't know that God is looking for a bunch of puppets to control.
Yeah,
Um, but a lot of people in their early awakening phase, oftentimes, they'll have these communications and conversations with the divine or with heaven, with God, and they'll say, God made me do this, or God told me to do this, and so I'm being strictly obedient. And I think that obedience is a step in that direction, but I think ultimately what happens on our road to sovereignty is that God ultimately wants us sovereign and autonomous. Oh, I also see that Nick has his hand raised. Go ahead. Go ahead, Nick, with your comment.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, thank you guys for this conversation. Something that just came to mind as you were talking about um violating or the laws being so minimalistic so as to not violate someone else's sovereignty. That rings so true to me, and mostly because let me turn my video on. There I am. And mostly because
You're
well,
muted.
that I had a call that came through. All right, so what I found is that the Lord, he's a righteous king, righteous and sovereign, and something that a righteous king never does. They never invade another kingdom. We only come by way of invitation, and so that makes perfect sense. Then set up that in the kingdom of heaven it would be set up so simply, um, in order to protect the sovereignty of each person that resides therein.
Yeah, I agree. I think that on this blueprint, if you even look at this blueprint as if it is also our individual ascension process, each of our paths will take us to an ascension phase. Um, I also think, gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Darn it. I lost my train of thought. I don't know if I'm going to get it back. I'm going
maybe
to
I
turn,
maybe
what?
I snitched it, because I had a spark of thought as you were
Oh,
as you
I
were
know what it
talking.
is. I know what it is. It's my gut feeling is that the higher our personal progression and ascension goes, the less rules we need to govern us, and the more self-governance takes place as we operate in the bounds of God, which is honoring agency and standing in charity and being fixed on his glory, right?
Beautiful. Oh, that's very beautifully put. Yeah, exactly. And so when you look at because see, when God forms man in his own image and likeness, and then he says male and female, what we see is with this creation blueprint is Adam and Eve, a lot of people think of as, okay, 6,000 years ago, planet Earth was devoid of intelligent human life. There might have been some kind of hominid looking, creature or something, there's a lot of debate about how to reconcile we'll call it the traditional method of interpreting creation in the Bible. So instead of looking 6,000 years ago to history and thinking archaeologists should find the first hut where a man and his wife and some kids started the human race, instead of seeing that, we can now see something different, because God calls man Adam and Eve. And the way we know this is in Genesis chapter 2, verse 23. Adam, speaking of his wife, he says, she's bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because taken out of man. And so we know that man is essentially the one flesh body of Adam and Eve joined together. And so man encompasses Adam and Eve as flesh and bone bodies. And if you look at Ephesians chapter 5, verse it's 30 through 32, Paul's making reference to that very scripture, and he's talking to the people, and he's saying, we are members of his body, of his flesh and of his bone, and his being Christ's body. And then he talks about the church and the bride, and the bride of Christ is the church. And so when you personalize this group of people joined together in this way, that's what a flesh and bone body is. And so if we look at Adam as the priesthood governing body and Eve as the nurturing motherly bride body, that's what we can look for to see the reality behind the symbol of Adam and Eve. And so now when you have that view of Adam and Eve as these distinct, tangible bodies of flesh and bone, which are collectives of people, now our eyes of understanding can open to see who is the Adam and Eve of the new world. Because this kind of goes into that big map of the mall, where are we? But you kind of need to know who are we too.
Yeah.
And so when you understand how to look at the spiritual cosmos that we're in and start to identify, okay, Christians, they're at the fish level, Islam, they're at the bird level, Protestants are at the creatures on dry ground level, and now you can navigate and know who you're dealing with. And I think that's also part of ascension, is you need to have your spiritual eyes opened to see the spiritual cosmos that you're a resident of.
Oh my gosh, I so agree. And I have two questions for you, because my one question was going to be, how do we open our spiritual eyes? How do we instigate or initiate that process of opening our eyes to see?
Yeah, well, to me, I begged for it. I felt a hunger. I thirsted because I recognized I couldn't see. I was going through life blind, and I think the first thing is you've got to realize there's something missing. And other people, they won't feel like anything's missing, and they're going to be happy, and they're going to live out their life, and these will be weird kind of things that they heard about that they didn't feel that draw to, because that wasn't their calling yet. They're still in the cooker, so to speak. But then there's those of us that have this deep sense of there's more. And so be open, be vulnerable, search, ask and ye shall receive, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. I mean, this is what Jesus laid out, this ascension path so clearly. And
I loved what you said in the beginning too, Jason, when you said, you hungered first. That was the first step. I hungered for it. I wanted it so badly, and I started asking. But you also said something about how you had to let go, literally, of every belief construct that you once thought that you had. Like I had to let go of what I thought I knew in order to open my mind and open my heart to receive what God had to give, right?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I had to clear the space because I never in my wildest dreams, I mean, this is what's amazing is this whole creation blueprint, you can clearly see how everything has played out. But other than Jesus and as in my view, Joseph Smith Jr., I've not seen anyone else that seems to have been conducting themselves conscientious that this is the blueprint.
Yeah.
But yet here it is. Like I don't know how much time we've got, but you can actually take the priesthood and the church that Joseph Smith founded, and if you take all these significant events of LDS history, and then you take the Adam and Eve story, there's absolute precise correlation between the two. And yet not a single Latter-day Saint that I've ever encountered would realize, oh, you mean we are Adam and Eve in that collective identity sense. None of them are actually consciously aware that that's who they are collectively in the cosmos, but yet they bear all the hallmarks of the Adam and Eve. You know, God placed them in Jackson County, Missouri, where we learn that they transgressed there. And because of that, there was the extermination order that drove them all out. I mean, it was legal to murder a Mormon until I was 6 years old in my own life.
Oh, wow.
Those laws were on the books that long that you could literally, and I think there was probably a Mormon that got killed and somebody got off because that was,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, we better change those laws. But the saints were expelled from what they believed, and I don't think they consciously knew. Joseph Smith knew because he said the Garden of Eden for the New World, that was the part that was unsaid, was in Jackson County, Missouri. And then Adam and Eve, after being driven out, they get clothed in the skin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the period of when we received the people tease us. They call it the magic underwear. You've got all these Mormons that have this special underwear. Well, that tells you who Adam and Eve are. They're clothed in that sacred garment.
Mm-hmm.
And so the body of Adam and Eve are clothed in that sacred garment, and that's another telltale sign that profiles who we are, as speaking to the Latter-day Saints. That and then where do they end up? The lone and dreary world. So as soon as they finished all those temple ceremonies that placed the garment on the people, then they get expelled again, and they end up going out into the frontier wilderness where the frontiersmen, I think it was maybe Jim Bridger, some of those guys, they're like, oh yeah, send all the Mormons out there, they're all going to die. Because it was just such a, the Indians were a factor, the climate, and if it weren't for several miracles, the LDS settlers would have died.
Yeah. Yeah. They would have been extinct.
And so here we are, even though we were given the fullness of the keys to become total sovereign citizens, and this gets into a little bit more about what man is versus human, is we enter a level of consciousness where we step into living our lives knowing that we have our eternal sovereignty. This isn't my first go around, so to speak. My eternal soul that I've embodied, that's resurrected within me, is the same part of me, my higher self, that has spanned previous cycles of creation. And that I'm now essentially raised in my consciousness to be aware that I'm an eternal being.
Yeah, I am one eternal round, just as this construct. In fact, I think that just answered Sharice's question. She said, so does this pattern also happen on a smaller microscopic scale in our personal lives? Ah, yes,
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. I
yeah,
am one eternal round. And so you could take that, um, your mapping of the creation blueprint, you could take that blueprint and you could look at that in this lifetime that you've had and see those different cycles in your lifetime play out.
yeah, yeah. And it's, in fact, I'll put the picture back on so we can kind of see that cycle. So in other words, um, we're literally in the pre-existence of the new world, and it's our spirits that go from world to world. And so oftentimes, we talk about, you know, um, God wouldn't this or God wouldn't that. And the thing of it is oftentimes what I've learned is because we're an eternal uh, being, we actually are who sets up what our future, because we make covenants and promises to ourselves and to others that we're going to fulfill certain objectives in the next world. Like LDS people, we talk about eternal inheritance, eternal families, and that's part of us stepping into that place of being a conscious eternal being. And so oftentimes what we're actually dealing with is our own higher self kicking our own behinds to hold to the agreements that our eternal self made in a previous cycle, for example.
Yeah, I
And
believe that. I believe
yeah,
that. I believe that our higher self is one with the maker of the universe, God, the father of our spirits. I mean, all the different gods that we can drum up in our minds, but I believe your higher self is one. There's unity and oneness with the gods. And so therefore we could actually even say my higher self is that governing agent of my
uh-huh.
physical body.
Yeah, exactly, Janet, because that's essentially, remember, a flesh and bone body is multiple people gathered together as members of the body. And
Mhm.
so when I was born, for example, my time and place and circumstances of my birth were foreordained.
Yeah.
And ministering angels look at the my chapter in the book of life for me, and so all the ministering angels know how to kind of cultivate and nurture the development of this person who's the foreordained means for that eternal spirit to be embodied. It fascinates me how much non-religious, more energy-based, metaphysical-based people are coming up with non-religious terminologies to basically explain the essence of the culmination of the religious development. They call it embody your higher self. Well, that's what resurrection actually is. Resurrection is a spiritual process that we're endeavoring to accomplish during our mortal life,
Right.
is to be spiritually quickened to where we have the means to fully embody our eternal sovereign identity.
Yeah, I believe that.
And so I was foreordained to have my place in the body of Adam as a part of the priesthood governing council that brings in the Father's kingdom. That to me is my every day I wake up. That's the we are here in my mind, in my map. That's where I am. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, you actually should be locked up in a loony bin somewhere, you know, but they can think what they want. But for me, that's my reality. And I struggled with the insecurity and the fear of, oh, am I able to measure up? Am I able to do this? And having struggles. And I mean, it's not like it's this pristine path of, oh, all roses and, I mean, the nice smell, but there's the thorns on those roses too, because you've to be in certain places in the cosmos, I mean, you've got to show the credentials. You've got to be proven out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And you can't skip steps. You can't go from day 2 to day 1 or to day 7 and then into day 1. You have to go through the phases as they progress or manifest into one another.
yeah. Yeah, and then if you look at Adam and Eve, they go through that process of being given all of this enlightenment, all of this spiritual power and knowledge and intelligence to where they can basically live with eternal consciousness. And yet they go through major trials. The serpent beguiles Eve, she partakes of the forbidden fruit. They fall, they in their fallen state, it's like the second death. The adversary buffets them and puts them under trial and tribulation. And Adam and Eve kind of go through this gauntlet of experiences. But then the beautiful thing is, and this is something that's somewhat unique to the LDS tradition, is we view that Adam and Eve in their lifetime are redeemed
Yeah.
and brought out of their fall within their life.
Mm-hmm.
And that all of that hardship and difficulty and everything that they go through, and that I now say we are in the midst of, the sun being darkened, the moon turning to blood, and all of this stuff has relevance. We even though Adam was given this fullness, he fell and he lost it for a time, and now we're in this period of darkness and chaos where it looks like the prison planet system is ultimately going to take over. That we're losing our liberty, we're losing our sovereignty. It's a lot of people are feeling like the way the world is going, that as soon as anybody tries to stand up and build a little Zion collective, it always seems like there's people that come into it and get overcome by these demonic influences, and they stir things up and it all falls apart. Or
Yeah.
you've got all these people yearning and trying to build this Zion society, but it just seems like every time that just gets crushed
Yeah.
time and time again. And people are losing hope that there ever is going to be a Zion society. But the promise that we have now is that even though we're at that very juncture, the beginning of day 1 of the new world, how does it say that it starts? It says there's darkness, there's a void, there's chaos.
Yeah.
And that's what we're in right now.
We're literally in the demolition phase of, have you ever seen that TV show where they come and they tear down the old house and they bring in the new, and they build these people a new house? Well, in order for that new house to be built, there has to be a demolition phase, and then you got to clear out all the gunk. And I think that we are about to embark on that demolition phase that is darkness and chaos. Well, we're probably in the midst of it, but I love that you talk about how that demolition phase is happening simultaneously, almost alongside the first day of the new creation.
Yeah, it's fascinating because what does God say? He says let there be light, and there was light. And the light that's being talked about is that intelligence of what it takes to overcome the darkness. And I believe that this revelation God gave to me is an extremely important part of that light, that eventually, when Adam and Eve become self-aware and realize who they are, that light opens their eyes of understanding and they become conscientious. Then there will be that ability to see the other players as well, because we have Abel and we have Cain and we have Seth, and Adam and Eve have other children too. And so then when we learn who the man child of the woman is, for example, see, once you tap into this pattern and this blueprint, you can start to get the lay of the land.
Yeah.
And
And it helps you with discernment as to
yeah,
where others are at on their journey.
yeah, because you've got a false light. And it's interesting, you look at the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night on day 4. Notice it says to rule. In other words, they will in the future.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so Christ returns to rule the day. And when do we have the division of day and night? That's day 1 of the new world. And so
Yeah.
the return of Christ is to bring in that light so that the people who resonate with these concepts of sovereignty and eternal identity and living free of the tyranny of corruption and all of that, it becomes this rally point where everybody can pull together.
So do you believe that the Christ, Yeshua, will come in physical form in the fullness of his glory at some point in this blueprint?
Yeah,
Okay, awesome.
absolutely. And the thing of it is, you got to remember, is he's the King of Kings, meaning they're all kings.
Yeah,
And and like Paul said, the body of Adam, it isn't one human.
yeah,
It's a gathering together of those individuals who are spiritually quickened to be in harmony surrounding this grand vision of
yeah.
living according to the sovereignty of the Father's kingdom. And really, I mean, Jesus, he wasn't about trying to get glory to him and to become the next grand imperial poobah and, you know, have his cult that just happens to be a global cult where he's
Right.
got all of his brainwashed minions, doing that. That is not at all what Yeshua is about.
Right.
He wants, there has to be order, and there's protocols and respect for for energies to flow properly, because there's the presiding energy, and you honor those who preside. But ultimately, any grievance, you can make a petition. It's not like you just have to suck it up and take abuse. Our relationship with God is truly a loving, compassionate understanding, where as long as your heart's in the right place and you're wanting what's best for all, because ultimately that's really the essence of the golden rule,
Yeah.
is we live conscientious of wanting, and and not this altruistic throw me in the garbage to save everybody else. No, it's let's all have an amazing experience. You care about yourself as well as others.
Yeah. Well, it's
And
born out of self-love. I mean, that's where it begins.
yeah,
Mhm.
and so we get this society where the body of Christ, it isn't just him, it's those who join with him and resonate with him, that at one-ment. People talk about the atonement of Christ, and it's how his approach to life is harmonized with others, and they join with him, and through that union there's this magnification of the power of their consciousness. And ultimately, I think that's what becomes the powerhouse for this whole, we'll call it the this whole plan of creation, really has the power to do its thing.
Yeah. I that gives me so much hope. It really does, because I talk to a lot of people who feel that their spiritual eyes are being awakened and they're developing in their own spiritual sovereignty, but they feel so very alone and very isolated. They have no one to talk to. They're hungry for companionship and connection and community and unity. And I think that that's the next phase I think that we're going to start seeing more and more of in this coming 2024, is this unity and community amongst spiritually sovereign beings. And Fernandez says, day 1 and day 7 is like a crossroads. We can choose as sovereign beings to step into the new. Oh, that's perfect. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. And a lot of people think, oh, if I have good intentions, that's enough. But it really isn't, because there's so many awful things done with the best of intentions. And so we really do need to work with that intelligence that God gives and really embody that. You know, we can't be saved in ignorance. And also another thing I wanted to point out is the kingdom of the lesser light to rule the night is the moon. And if you think about the moon, it has no light of its own.
Yeah.
The only light it does, it's reflecting and passing on. But the problem with that is when you reflect light, it gets reversed.
Mm.
And so what's good at the source after being reflected is now the evil and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so in the adversary's lunar kingdom, because right now planet Earth is being divided.
Yeah.
And you're either going to go with the celestial or the solar, the sun, or you're going to go with the lunar. Because both are going to exist. And that's the thing I like. I think was it Carlos that mentioned that we are making that choice right now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people that say, oh, you believe in freedom, you believe in liberty, you're just this greedy, like Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, where she kind of puts a different light on, the virtues of greed, if you will. I mean, there's this perspective that people have, that if you want liberty and sovereignty, that just means you're a greedy, selfish person that doesn't care.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah. I've heard
there's
about that.
this view of that what the people that are trying to build this high consciousness society of sovereigns, other people view them as greedy, selfish, and so good and evil get mixed up.
Yeah, they do. Like good is bad, bad is good. And now there's this gray area, this fuzzy area of how do I discern what is of the moon and what is of the sun? Like how do I discern? And I look at it too in the spiritual sovereignty versus this new age movement. There's a lot of people who are claiming enlightenment. And, I think that dark beings can experience and go through enlightenment to some
Yeah.
degree. But so what in your mind, Jason, what is it that draws that line that allows us to be able to discern, is this of the true light, or is this just a mirrored reflection that's something deceptive? How do we discern that line? What's your take?
Well, this is just for me personally, but I know my own conscience guides me, but that's unique to me. Everybody else is going to have their own foreordained higher self that's going to be working with them. So their experience is going to be different than my personal experience. And so, you know, for me, being
Hey, do we
worked with,
still need screen share on here?
I could remove it. I
Yeah,
apologize.
remove it and then we'll just kind of visit.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, yeah, that's better. Um, yeah, how to discern. For me, obviously, I I have a devotion to wanting to understand the things of God.
Mhm.
And so I've spent so much time just going through the Word of God. And not just the Bible, and not just, the Book of Mormon and the other LDS standard works, but I've actually spent a lot of time going through other religions and traditions and even esoteric and that kind of stuff, just because for me, it was just like I wanted to take it all in.
Yeah, me too. I've done that too.
And so and then when you see all the similarities that exist among all these spiritual traditions, I think in some respect you kind of get a sense of the general landscape, but then seeing this blueprint and just being able to align what roles, like being able to see who Abel and Cain and Seth are, for example. uh then it's like, because we know Cain, he had good intentions and he made an offering, but it wasn't actually what was asked for. And so when you clearly know, okay, well, what is the acceptable offering, it kind of becomes more a logical thing, a thing of intelligence. And
Mhm.
your heart is like the engine that drives you to get there, because your heart won't be satisfied until you're there.
And the heart really cannot be deceived. The brain can, but I believe that the heart cannot be deceived. And I've had people say to me so many times, you do realize you can be deceived, because I've shared my experience with many, and people say, you can be deceived. You know that, right? And I'm like, yeah, we're all deceived. We live in a world filled with deceit. It's not really, I don't think God cares as much about whether or not we're deceived in any of this. But I think more than that, he cares about where is our heart. He cares about where your intentions are. That's my
Yeah.
personal thought on that.
Yeah, and with that foundation, it's like if I look over the last 30 years of my life, to me, it's I was always willing to be vulnerable and put myself out there,
Hmm.
share what I currently believed. And then when people have had things to say back to me, listen. I mean, maybe there'll only be one gem in, one dump truck load of dirt that you're going through. You'll go through a lot of dirt, but don't miss those gems. Be willing to eat humble pie. If you're, kind of like you got your next little shiny toy that you're just excited and playing with it, and you think you've got all the answers with it, and you go out and and some other people are like, oh, not believing or giving criticism, receive that criticism,
Yeah.
let it in, look at other people's points of view, and when you allow yourself to be vulnerable that way, essentially what you're saying is, God, I trust you to guide me and help me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be willing to let myself be vulnerable, be exposed to the multiplicity of perspectives that are out there. And then eventually it's kind of like truth becomes self-evident, but it does need to be seen in order to be discerned as self-evident.
So we
And
have to have an open mind and we have to have an open heart, and there has to be space enough to receive it rather than just saying, "Oh, don't look over there." That's that's dangerous. Don't look over there. Don't open your mind to that. You could be led astray. I also think it's dangerous to think that any one human being or man or prophet can lead you, your soul, to where you're going. Because he
yeah,
doesn't, they don't know where you're going as a infinite divine soul. They don't know your personal path. And so I think for me personally, um, the secret sauce lies in being willing to have an open mind, and also taking, like you said, being vulnerable enough to just stand in it for a bit, let it process, let yourself stew on things, take your questions to God directly, get those answers, and then stand the hell up
yeah,
in that truth that you receive, and know that if it came from God, I'm going to experiment on this until I know it beyond a shadow of any doubt. And the only way to know it is to step into it and experiment on it, so that you can see the fruits.
yeah. That's beautiful, Janet. Yeah, and so for me, this blueprint really is what locked me in,
Yeah.
and it gave me that foundation. Because Jesus talks about that he builds his house upon the rock, and that stable, solid foundation is the word of God, because he does teach us the truth, and he gives it to us in it's so amazing how the word of God, it's got all these layers of depth, and we tend to just see those things that we're ready for. Other things will just kind of gloss over, and so throughout our lives we really should be daily partaking of that spiritual nourishment of and it might even be other inspired writings. It doesn't necessarily even have to be scriptures. Or I even think the pursuit of science and understanding how this world really works, how the universe ticks, because there's truth on so many different levels, and the pattern applies. And so I see scientists genuine, sincere scientists is like, I mean, in anciently, the scientists, that was religion.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
the priests that could do all this, what to us is just chemistry, to them it was magic, you know?
Yeah. The science of theology.
Yeah, and so pursuit of truth really ultimately is what I think is our surest vehicle for ascension. I mean, Jesus says the truth shall make you free. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's going to upset a lot of people. I mean, when you think about what I've shared here, there's a lot of people that could be rather offended. What do you mean
Yeah.
it's not all about Islam and everybody needs to become Islam, or they're going to hell, or everybody needs to confess Jesus is the Christ, and that, you know, and da 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 da, and and everybody else who doesn't see it the way I see it is going to hell. You know, all of this divisive, you know, good intended but misapplied, uh, what should we call it?
You can call it whatever you want. BS.
Yeah,
Whatever you want to call that.
you know, that's what's going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but to face the truth, it's like a lot of people are going to find out they're not quite as exalted and elevated as they think.
Yeah.
And then other people are going to be like, oh, you mean those covenants I took in the temple put me here? No wonder the penalties were so serious if I do it wrong or if I mess up, because there's a lot that rides on those souls called to be operating at this level of accountability. And so it's this delicate balance of where your place is and what's appropriate. And so when I interact with people, I'm very sensitive that not everybody's ready to get thrown into the a governing seat. I mean, governance is great responsibility,
Yeah. Yeah, it
and
is.
it's not fit for everyone.
Yeah. And I would go back to what you were saying about earlier. Some people will be triggered by this information. And if you are triggered by some of the things that we've covered or talked about today, good. I would say that's a good thing, because I get excited when people get triggered
Yeah.
by some of the things that I talk about. I get a lot of people that reach out to me during the week after classes and they have questions. And if you're triggered, it means you have questions. If you're triggered, it means you need to take those questions to God and receive those answers in the way that you do. And if you don't have a methodology yet for yourself for asking questions and receiving divine downloads and help from heaven and having God show you who you are and show you how the divine communicates with you, develop that. Learn to develop it. Ask questions. Start practicing. Act on what you receive and see what the fruits are that come. There's only one way to get good at it. It's like going to the gym. You cannot get good and muscular by just reading books about working out. You actually have to go to the gym and practice. And so that would be my takeaway. What is your takeaway from today? The topic that we shared today. Jason, I'll let you have the final word.
Okay. You know what comes to my mind is God, he loves us, and he is so patient. He he gives us this whole creation to give us all these experiences to get to know who we can be, and to give us the opportunity to grow into who we want to be.
Yeah.
And I just think to myself, all the mistakes and failings along the way, and then when you see this blueprint and it culminates in this great glorious crescendo that ends in transgression and fall and heartache and hardship, but yet God's going to redeem us from that. And and it's those, you know, the meek shall inherit the earth. The people that their hearts are just totally given to that vision of caring about everyone, including oneself, and honoring each other's sovereignty. And when we make mistakes, it's just because we need more growth, we need more learning experience, and as we are willing to be vulnerable with each other, and and God's going to see us through, and he's going to give us our new name for the new world in a measure of glory that's best for us. And I think we can just, regardless of how things go, just trust that our place in the new world will be, it's basically what we're ready for,
Yeah,
and what calls to us, and whatever price we pay is going to be worth it.
I agree.
And
And you can't mess it up.
yeah, really, I mean, when you think about it, um, yeah, that this gets into predestination, foreordination, which is a fascinating, is there really truly free will, or the illusion of free will? And it's and that's the thing is when things are eternal, your beginning is every moment of your existence.
Ah, that's beautiful. I'm going to just hang on that thought for a minute. And if you know that and you can come from that true identity of the fact that you are infinite, you are eternal, you are everything you think you need, nothing can threaten you.
Yeah.
What could possibly threaten the infinite?
Yeah.
And so if you know that and you can come from that place, that's peace, that's inner peace. That is wholeness, that's resolute, that is sovereign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we have to look forward to, as I project, is God will redeem those people who have aligned themselves with this manner of life. It's what they're ready for. It's what fulfills them. You're not going to take somebody who didn't want that and throw them in it. It's going to be those who truly want it, and put in the effort of preparation, and everybody else, God's going to bless them absolutely as much as he possibly can. Even if they're called somewhere else for some cycles or whatever. But we're going to have a portion of planet Earth where we do live in a high state of consciousness, where we are a kingdom of kings and queens and priests and priestesses who are fully conscientious of their eternal existence and identity.
Who
And
will gather together in
yeah,
unity.
and it'll be a society that will last centuries. Our scientific advancement is going to just make what we have now seem even, I mean, there's so much ahead.
Yeah.
And we can probably hardly imagine. And right now we have the glory and the honor to be in that place and that timing when this light breaks forth, when the means for us to bury the hatchet of contention in all of these needless ways and transcend all of this negativity and build this, what to me I call is our celestial home. Because
Yeah.
I won't feel at home until I'm in that civilization that lives in that way.
Yes, but also the kingdom of heaven is within you,
Yeah.
right? So we can have that now. I believe that. But thank you so much for your message today. I think that we're about out of time, so we're gonna wrap this up. But I really appreciate your words. I appreciate you coming on and sharing. I'm sure you will come back because I'm gonna invite you back we're gonna talk
Okay,
about
great.
more things together. I just really appreciate you being willing to share some of these things that God has put on your heart and into your mind, and you've openly received with a willing heart and been willing to share those things that are sacred to you. Appreciate that. For those of you who would like to go a little bit deeper, today we're going to be doing a live group healing session over on my website, greatlifegreaterimpact.com. If you're a member of that, we go live in there in group healings every Tuesday, about an hour after this class is over. And if that interests you and you'd like to do a little bit more healing, go a little bit deeper, and do an extended version of this class, then join us over there. Thanks again, everybody, for your participation. Thanks for being here. Share this, like it, comment on it so that it'll be delivered to more people. And again, if you got some benefit or value from it, please don't be selfish. Share it around with people you think that could benefit from this conversation as well. And as always, sending love and light. Mwah. Take care, everybody. Have a blessed rest of your day. Talk to you later. Bye.